Hello, hello. And I'm so excited that you are joining us for another discussion about leaving Hillsong. There's never been a better time than today to leave Hillsong, apart from yesterday or last week. We had really wonderful feedback from talking about Bible college with Yolandi, and something that seems to keep coming up is people saying things like, oh, well, compared with what she went through and she got so sick, I didn't really go through much at all. And it seems to be really characteristic of this movement to get people to minimise their experience. And they already do a really good job on silencing people and getting them not to complain, but please don't minimise what you've been through. What you've been through is as valid as anybody else's experience, and you know how it makes you feel, and you know the impact it's had on your life. So, I just really think don't allow that real minimising. And another thing that goes along with that is that forgiveness on cue thing that Hillsong and churches like that make people do. That it's up to you to just go around forgiving people non-stop. And we won't get into how biblical it is because that's not my expertise, but I'll leave that up to people to go and research themselves. But what it does do, the demands for forgiveness and loyalty no matter what, is it really allows room to normalise abuse and make way for the next round of exploitation, because you're just going to be forced to forgive that as well. And you end up with people really minimising their experiences. So, yeah, Yolandi Bosch has been through a lot, and we're going to dive right into that, what the costs have been to her in the real world, about, a lot of people desperately want to do something to change things, but the costs are pretty high, and we talk about that and how she's doing now. So here's part 2 of a contestant in their game.
You just blew it. You just blew your life away. And I was like, I don't understand why you're saying I'm sick.
It's horrible. How long did you keep going for? How long were you there? All up?
I think it was about 6 or 7 months that I was there. And then eventually it came to a boiling point. In between all of this, I started questioning so many different things that they were doing. For instance, my friend group, I made these incredible friends who I still call some of my best friends in life that I have to this day. And I'm thankful to God that He used Hillsong to bring us together. Even though most of the things that they did were evil, I got to meet my friends that are, some of my best friends. But these friends, we started having our home churches outside of Hillsong, like not a church really even. We had like these get-togethers at our girls' houses, but not my house, our houses. And they would have like worship nights. And eventually what happened was somebody snitched on us, and we ended up having to get in front of these people again. And they said, look, why are you having a church? You've been divisive against Hillsong Church and creating your own church. You're not supposed to do that. And we were like, but we're just serving God, and we're just singing together, we're just hanging out together. What's wrong with spending time together? And they hated that. They really hated it. And the more they tried to do that, the more people started coming to these house events because they were disgruntled with Hillsong. So we ended up having a full house every week. There would be like 50 people in one house, because they got something there. They really received something out of these get-togethers, and they didn't get that from going to church. So the girls in my house, we had a big fight. So one girl accused me of stealing her milk. And her milk, yeah. And I said to her, I said to her, you need to stop calling me a liar, and you need to stop telling me that I stole your milk. And even if I did take some of your milk, which I didn't, that's a train smash. You can just relax yourself. And she went nuts. And obviously that came to a point, and then she contacted them, and she said she didn't want to live with me anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure I could have handled it better as well at that point. I was still very immature myself. It was such a stressful place to be in. And with my friends, because my friends were also going through the same thing, and they were also constantly being, I started conforming more and more towards Hillsong to try and be more like them. So I got a lot more privileges because I started conforming, and I knew that I needed to do that. It's not that I wanted to be fake, but I needed to survive it to stay in Australia as well, and to just finish my studies. And a lot of people do that. So kind of just do what they say and just shut up. I ended up being put onto street teams. And I think this was a turning point for me as well. And it was a turning point in terms of my own maturity as well, and realizing what Hillsong was all about. And I started serving on these teams. And what they do is they send out people to all the areas in Australia to mow people's lawns, and then to like spend time with them, have a coffee with them, especially more poor people, lower income. And I don't like discriminating against people, or right. That's how they put it to you. I see people as all equal, but that's what they do. And you're not allowed to talk about Jesus. You're not allowed to talk about God, which I found very strange, but you are allowed to invite them to Hillsong. So they told us, the government told them, that we're not allowed to talk to them about any personal issues. But then I started becoming closer to a few of the people there. And as you go to these things, you start talking to people and you do grow closer to some people. And there was one lady that I was assigned to visit, and this lady had an issue with her husband, and her son had been acting out. And these groups that we were in constantly talked about the son acting out really badly, and and he had like cigarette stumps on his arm. And then the little girl, I think, was then being bullied by the little brother. And so the mom came to me and she specified things that were happening in the house. And I said, look, I think we need to talk to the police about it, because this sounds like domestic abuse. And domestic abuse is a serious thing. As somebody who believes in the duty of care, it's my duty of care to actually go out and to do something about it.
What happened when you told them?
So I was actually working myself up in that office. I was doing really well in that office. They really liked me. I was actually quite surprised, because they told me I was super divisive, and how dare I call the police, or want to call the police, or give anybody that kind of information. It's not the way they do things. And then Australia would throw me out of the country. And I thought, wow, is that the way Australia does things? Because I've only been here 6 months. Maybe I don't know enough. So these were the group leaders that I had, and they were on the team that day. And I mean, these were other people from third year, fourth year, whatever. But, it was just really disheartening. And then they ended up taking this to Susan Smith, which was this lady that was the psychologist. And she was seeing me every week and telling me how terrible I was. And I was just going to heal the rest of my life, and all sorts of other nonsense. And, she's told other people similar things in terms of their abuse situations, and told them it was their fault. And I had the choice. I'd rather be thrown out of the country and go to the police. That's what I thought at that point. But then I ended up just staying silent about it, because and I was kicked off the team, and they told me I could never go back again, and I could never talk to the lady again.
Okay.
Which was really sad for me. And you know what? That morning before I got kicked out of the college, I knew that I would be. And I just spoke to God, and I said to God, I know that I've probably come to a point where this is going to be an end for me. It came to a point for me where I said, okay, you know what? I'm obviously not going to fit into this place. We obviously have two different worldviews, and it's okay. I'm just going to have to trust that God will send me somewhere else. So long story short, they ended up calling me in. They told me that I've been too divisive. They can't handle me anymore. They just want me out of the college. And eventually they told me I had a choice. I could either withdraw, or they could kick me out. And if they kick me out, I need to be out of the country within 2 weeks. Maybe it was 7 days, actually, 7 days or 14 days. I can't remember exactly. But whatever it was, I was told that it was over, and that if I didn't find another college, and if I didn't withdraw, so I had to withdraw from the college, because I didn't know my rights. I didn't know that I could fight and I could get money back or whatever else. I was just really not,
That's
not
incredible. How does that feel for you? You're 21 or 22 at this point, far from home. What do you do?
Devastating. I've lost all my friends. I mean, I didn't lose the friends that I ended up having after, that I met there, that became my friends for the rest of my life. But I mean, I lost my reputation. It felt devastating. And when I walked out of that place and I got kicked out, the feeling of going into Gloria Jeans and finding out, and then having to pack my bags, because they're giving me only like a few days to pack my bags and get my stuff out of that house, and then find a new place. I know no one else. I only know Hillsong. I only know that I actually did know a few other people, because I ended up going to these other churches as well around the corner, and I ended up making 2 or 3 other friends, which was a good thing, because if I didn't do that, I would have been completely lost.
Did they give you the meeting at Gloria Jeans?
No. What I mean is, like, everybody would hang out at Gloria Jeans. Like, it was such a tight group of people that they were all in Gloria Jeans. And when you walk in there, and they see you, they look at you like, oh, she got kicked out. Like, can't believe she got kicked out. And it was a running theme. Like, from day one of getting into Hillsong College, they would always talk about people that had been kicked out. And you would always be scared of getting kicked out and doing the wrong thing. So you get this vibe of almost like a horror movie of people staring you down of when you walk into the Coles or you walk into the Gloria Jeans, because they know that you have been kicked out and they won't even greet you. They will ignore you. They will whisper about you. It is terrible. It is the worst feeling. Honestly, it is. It's a cult-like situation. It really felt horrific to me being in that situation. And I ended up, I stayed with a lovely lady who took me in, because at least the owner of Shoes and Socks, which is a really popular shoe brand in Australia. So I used to work for her. So I worked for her, and I remember her distinctly telling me one day that she couldn't handle that the college would constantly change my schedule so much because it was just too much. And I just couldn't even keep a job properly because the pressure from them was so bad. But then after I left, I immediately had to enroll at Alpha Crucis, which is a sister college of theirs. But it was a 2-day course, and I could work the rest of the time, which is I could work for 20 hours a week, legally work for 20 hours and then not be bothered and just go to college for those 2 days, and the rest of the week would be free. Actually really helped a lot. But then I still stayed in the same area and still tried to go to Hillsong to make amends because I still thought that there was something wrong with me and I needed to fix myself.
Okay.
But then I started getting cut out from everything.
How long do you do that for, Alpha Crucis, before you?
2 years. Yeah, but ending up leaving Bella Vista, saying my goodbyes to Bella Vista, knowing that I had very limited friends left in Bella Vista, and then going to Manly. And then my friends following well, and us meeting this amazing pastor eventually who helped us heal from all of the stuff that we went through. And it was strange because no one knew that the other person was going to that church, but for some reason, people were hearing through the grapevine that this church was providing so much healing and support and psychological support. And this church in DY, that people were just coming and flocking there from Hillsong. And this pastor was so dumbfounded by the amount of people that, that had come through it. Eventually moved away. I just wanted to get away from Hillsong Church and the people because I'd never met so many fake people in my entire life. And that's not to say the friends that I made. I'm talking about the college and the people that worked there and, the Eustons and so forth. So I stayed for, what was it, three years. And then I went back to South Africa only for 2 months. And then I went to the States to another church.
I mean, something that's made you quite different from a lot of people that have stepped away is you've always wanted to do something about it, always wanted to speak about it, and then it happened on an international level when you spoke. I mean, it's a very different kind of experience of leaving Hillsong again. So what has that been like for you? Because so many people are so afraid of speaking and afraid of lawsuits and afraid of repercussions, and yet you've overcome a lot of that. I mean, what has that been like for you to put your name to, a range of experiences and negative experiences?
It's been very hard. I mean, it took me, what was it, 3 or 4 years, maybe longer to talk. I mean, you've been through the journey with me as well, so it's been a long time. I mean,
Relatively speaking, that's not a long time for people. I mean, there's people. 20 years is not unusual. Yeah.
No, I understand. But I mean, it took me a while to come to terms with the fact that I need to stand up and I need to talk out. And if I don't speak out, nobody's going to speak out and nobody's going to stand up for students in that position. And what if I have to look at somebody that's 18 years old and they have to go to Hillsong College and they go through the same thing that I went through, or they're 21 years old. I mean, I was a little bit older, but majority of people go from the age of 18 to formative years, and you go through something like that, it could really scar you for life. So I have to think of my duty of care to people, and my duty is to inform people. It's still your free choice to go wherever you want to go to. I can't tell you don't go somewhere, but I can give you the information of this is the way that it's impacted me and this is the way it's impacted other people. I think with
a lot of people they desperately want to do something about it, but the fear is incredibly strong on top of the trauma that holds
I
people
think it's not just it's the fear, yes. It's also the stigma of the way that Hillsong is that it's all about, I guess, a tribal mindset, and everybody's in this tribe, and you still have friends in the tribe, and even though you've left the tribe, you've still got a root of the tribe, and you don't want to mess up those friendships, and you think that if you talk out, you're going to look like just another disgruntled person who's been hurt by the church, or a disgruntled girl that's been abused by some guy. So a lot of people have a perception in their mind. They don't want to be pegged as something, and they don't want to put themselves through that. But it's not about that, though. It's about actually looking after other people. If you're putting yourself, I mean, I put myself out there, and I didn't get a big thank you for it.
Well, it's just that every single person that I've spoken to has a very high degree of fear. Some of them are afraid of God's punishment.
But it's a false fear. It's a false fear. It's just a fear of a false fear.
But when what have been the costs to you for putting your name, which is an uncommon name?
I've lost jobs. I mean, things like that. I mean, I walked into a job interview, got a great job, and then one of the directors came back and said, we might work with Hillsong at some point. I can't hire you anymore. And you're great, but and then I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll walk away. And then he rehired me. And I said, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to now work for you because I feel like that's just really not going to work for me. It's just things like that. It really does take a lot out of somebody if they go out on a limb. And it also, it didn't help my mental health. It was difficult to do. I needed to be mentally strong to do it, but I won't lie. I had Hillsong people come after me, say the most horrific things about me. I had one guy, who pretended to know me, but he really never knew me at all. I mean, I literally said 2 words to this guy. I think maybe I spent one day chatting to him, and he just pretended to know me, and he called me all these terrible names, and he's on staff at Hillsong, and I mean, those things really do affect you because I'm a human being. You read those things and you're like, that's hurtful. That's actually kind of devastating that you would say something like that to me, and that you'd actually go on a public forum, say you're a Christian, you love Jesus, you want to see the best for people, but you would go out and you would actually do that.
So tell me, how do you feel about what you've done then?
No, I definitely do not regret. Look, I am who I am. I've never not been myself. And people like me or they don't like me. And it doesn't really matter to me if people do or they don't, right? I'm going to do what I feel is best, and sometimes that best can be good, sometimes that best can be bad, but I'm still going to do what I think is best. And I don't regret it. I really feel like I needed to stand up. There are students that really can't talk for themselves because of the fact that they have had extreme abusive situations at Hillsong.
Sure.
And that's trauma, and you can understand. But then there are those students that could just come out and say, look, these things are happening, we need to make a change. And if we don't talk, and it doesn't mean that they have to talk on their own individually, but as a group, let's stand together, let's collectively come out and let's do something about this, because the next generation of people going into this college are going to come out damaged.
Surely 1% of them, 6 of them could band together. And so I mean, what's interesting,
but they don't want to. They're so scared. They're like, no, I can't talk, and I'm going to back out. And I'm like, why
what is this fear? I mean, I want to know how many people have been sued by Hillsong for breaking NDA or defamation. Or
we know of one person because he's had one lawyer's letter, but I mean, and it meant zero to him, and this was a completely different situation to a college situation.
I'm talking about someone who attended Hillsong, who, was part of the thing, and then has, spoken out or threatened to say, apart from a letter. Have we seen court dates? Have we seen?
Never. Hillsong will never do that. And something that I had to learn through this process, because I was so scared that Hillsong would sue me, but it was a false fear because they would never do that. And it was actually you that said that to me as well. If Hillsong sues somebody for saying something about their own experience, what would that tell people about them and the rest of the world out? I mean, there's been people that have spoken out on different TV shows and so forth, and they've never once sued anybody. So they might sue Qual Lentz or someone else under a contract, personally, privately, but I doubt that they would come after you. But it's also the NDAs. I mean, if you were there after 2016, you have an NDA, and that, to be honest, that does justify people to be scared. that, you know, they've signed away some sort of right to speak. I've, for instance, been in contact with an MP. He was the only one that was willing to actually give us an audience. And I actually went ahead and I gave him a list of names of people. But it's like people just back out, and they're even scared, even though he's given them complete transparency and diplomacy and saying that, look, if you speak out and I have your names in writing, they can't do anything to you because you're protected under federal law. But they still don't understand that. And
what do you mean they're protected?
Because if he speaks for them and he uses their name in Parliament or whatever else, they actually get protected. There's some sort of law that protects them. And I'm not exactly...
Parliamentary privilege, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, that's what he's giving them. And they have all of this protection. So it must be a social thing as well. I think it has to do with the stigma of being labeled as anti-Christian, as labeled as, you know, losing your friends or your family, because a lot of people have friends and family that are still attending the church. And I mean, I just don't think people want to be seen as that. They quickly shut down when, you know, when they get asked to talk or go to some sort of government, which I don't understand. And it really does disappoint me, because I feel like, you know, I'm the only one that's really stood up besides the 60 Minutes one.
Yeah, it's something, it's not new at all. You know, if not 100%, then close to it, of people are afraid when they make contact. And that's what I'm trying to pinpoint is, you know, what is that fear? It's definitely to do with trauma and with long-term hypnotic practices that have been instilled that make people afraid. But, you know, above and beyond that, journalists have been pulling their hair out for all these years, as you know. And it's real last minute stuff, isn't it? It's, you know, that, yeah.
And they pull out right at the end as well. Yeah. I don't know what it is. It could be, I think it's stigma thing, you know, and some of them are not Christian anymore even, and they'll still not talk. And maybe it's a fear of the media, maybe it's a fear of being labeled as something, I'm not sure, you know. And it is quite concerning. You know, I'm not saying it's for every person to go out there and talk to the media and you know, give out a big story and everything, but it's still something, you know, going on the record and saying that, look, we've spoken to 5 students, we won't name them, but these 5 students have all had issues with Hillsong. It's not about me at the end of the day. My story is just a small part of a massive big story. Yeah, I feel like these students at some point they need to stand up for the rest of the students that will come in as well.
And I mean, this isn't about the students either. Like it is every single, you know,
it's volunteers, it's everyone, you know.
So
but the volunteers are more open to talk, which is funny though.
So, you know, something else you noticed was the political influence through Hillsong as well, wasn't it? Maybe that's...
I think definitely the year that I was in there in college, I was very much aware of Australian politics becoming very much included within the Hillsong church culture, I guess. We had quite a few MPs that came to church, and it was definitely something that I saw happening on a regular basis, and they would tell us about that as well. And we had ribbon cuttings and things like that with various influential people. We had people like Tanya Davies, who was actually on staff back then, and she was working for Donna. And so you could see the political influence coming in, and also Brian Houston building this bridge towards the political side, more with the Liberal Party, but also with the Labor Party, which was quite surprising to me. Having these inroads and building his influence, you know, having these constant influences, and you kind of feel like Hillsong's like the Church of Australia in a way. Well, back then, that's the way it felt to me, and that's the way they portrayed it. So saying that they had all these spheres of influence. So they had the sphere of influence within, you know, obviously music industry, and then eventually later on the movie industry. But then at that stage when I was in college, they had more of this political influence coming in. And what's interesting to me is that I spoke to somebody a while back, and they would talk to me about the ex-MP John Barilaro, and he's a Hillsong member, and I was like, oh, I thought he was Catholic. She's like, no, he's 100%, you know, he's at the church. So I'm just thinking that constantly you've got these people who are in power positions, you know, making rules, and then we've also got the situation with Tanya Davies where she's, you know, contacting Brad Hazard because Brian Houston made a comment about churches not being open. You know, it was a manipulative move, because you're not supposed to be, you know, going to Brad Hazard or to whatever else because you're doing it.
By manipulative, I mean you mean corrupt, like this. yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it is manipulative, because if
gobsmacking.
Brian Houston is, yeah, exactly, because Brian Houston is throwing out his toys out of the cart, and he's saying, I want my singers to sing. Yes, okay, great. I want church singers to sing as well, personally, because I'm a Christian. But if I'm a church leader and my friend, who happened to used to be one of my old employees, is now going to the health minister, and the health minister is now making a quick move, and the health minister denied this. He said he had thousands of people emailing him, but we don't have proof of that. And he then makes an amendment to the law within a few hours. There's no actual evidence that's going, scientific evidence
Incredible.
in the situation. And then obviously having ScoMo and having Brian, together in cahoots with each other. And it's just that there's just too many connections and too many dots, and that is worrying to me, that one church could have such an influence within the government.
I mean, I was watching all the Friendly Geordie stuff today as well. So John Barilaro is still very relevant. There's a fixated persons unit that the police run for people that, hold strong political beliefs. I want to ask you what you make of them in South Africa, because I can't stand the sight of it. And I see that they've done nothing but use terms like family, and they want to build a nation. And considering what South Africa went through with HIV, and losing a generation or two of people in some areas, it just seems so insidious.
Look, I just think they have a whole marketing team that just looks at each country, and they just try and do this whole marketing spiel. They're probably the most brilliant marketers that you will ever meet in your life, right? I don't think there's a better and bigger marketing machine than Hillsong. And I think that they probably do that in South Africa. And I've seen them use all sorts of different things. They use racism, they use, whether it's a health issue, whatever it is, they will try and leverage some sort of success from a marketing campaign towards whatever social topic there is. That is something they do in South Africa to probably wheel people in, and the rest of Africa as well. Likewise, they do that in Australia as well. I think it's just a part of who they are. They use whatever marketing tactics they can. I mean, there is a lot of concern as well regarding them having so many properties and being property developers, of being a property developer in Rosebery and acting as a property developer in Rosebery. I mean, it's super, it's there, it's true. I mean, I have friends that own a property in that building, and Hillsong is the property developer. They've purchased that land. They couldn't build a church there because the council would not give them a right of building a church there. But it could also equally be that they just give them the wrong DA, and the DA just doesn't go through. I mean, I work with this stuff. That's my job currently. I mean, there's a few of them. There's some in Queensland as well. So they do have quite an extensive property portfolio, and we don't really know where those funds go and why they're doing it, because essentially those funds should not be tax-free, and I hope they're not tax-free. I mean, South Africa, it's very corrupt. The country is super corrupt. So, I mean, anything could be happening, and it's what we're saying is purely speculation. But
are there similar kinds of laws with tax-free for charities?
Same as here.
If they are able to get somebody like you and all these Bible college students to volunteer to the point where they pass out, what are they able to do when, people don't have the same kinds of access to resources? And
I mean, my story is still really mild compared to
no.
It is compared to, in terms of where other people would serve to the point where they want to throw themselves off of a bridge, kind of thing. And then there's stories like that. There's students who have really gone through that. They were there for 5-6 years, and they were serving so much that they ended up giving up everything, that they were at the point of suicide. How many people committed suicide that we don't know about?
Yeah.
I mean, there's stories of that as well. So
a lot more than
the extent of that is just too much, because if you work somebody so hard to that point where they're not even getting, I mean, we've heard the stories of coming out of the US of the babysitting and the absolutely disgusting pay that some of these students got. And I mean, they can't even feed their own kids, so they leave the intern to look after the kids, and then they have to pay for the kids' food as well, and that they're using their that kind of thing. Those kind of things really break people. And if you're sleep deprived and and going through all of that, I mean, it can be quite devastating.
I had a mother write to me from somewhere in the United States recently and say that her daughters wanted to go to a Hillsong Bible college there. They wanted to pursue musical careers, and they're very high quality colleges. They've got, the best equipment and all that kind of stuff. So what would you write back to her if you'd received that? That was, she was just checking out the Bible college, and, they're strong Christians and their daughters want to go there and become musicians. What do you think?
Look, first of all, I have my own personal experience at Hillsong. However, I would probably say I would do it with caution, because if you are putting your child through that and your child is used to a different way of Christianity, let's say they've grown up maybe Baptist or so forth, it might be very hard for them to conform, but it might also be, it could be very difficult in different ways. It depends on the person and the person's personality. But overall, if it was my kid, I would not be sending them there because of the psychological influences. And just because of all the different stories that have come out, be cautious and talk to other people, look at the good and the bad. There's a lot of questions that you should ask. You should probably ask them as well, is there going to be an NDA? Will I be allowed to talk to my daughter on a regular basis? Just, really like having a checklist of these things, looking at the history of what's going on there as well. And yeah, I would really just do my homework before I send my kids there. It's a difficult question, I guess, because I don't like forcing people or telling them what to do. And
I mean, your faith is obviously quite strong still. I know that for a fact. What do you make of Bobby and Brian?
Look, I honestly, I wish, I prayed that there was a point for us to sit down and talk things through, and to actually come to a point where they would actually understand where some of the students come from, and not just take the word of their staff or whatever else, and just actually say, look, we want to work together and want to make this college great. We want to fix things. I've always been very open about this. I've had the college email me before and wanting me to talk to their lawyers and all of that, but they've never actually reached out to me and to other students personally. They've basically, if we've asked a question, they've blocked us on Twitter, they've blocked us on Instagram, but we've never really had an open conversation with these people to say, look, why is this happening? Do you really want to change your culture in your church to make it better? Because I don't want them to burn down. I want them to change and to admit that there's things that need changing. But on the other hand, they have refused to this point and to this day, and it's been years, to pick up the phone and say, look, we understand, we're really sorry that that's happened, and let's have a chat about it and let's talk about it. So it shows me their intention is not really to change their culture. Their intention is just to keep on going the route that they're going, and to just, I guess, gaslight people that don't agree with them. Or so my message, I guess, to them would be, and my perception of them would be, that they either really need to sit down and ask themselves, is this the way that they want Hillsong to continue, or is this just really who they are? They're just really manipulative people who don't care about their congregants.
Whether if they changed, they'd be the same, or whether just unfollowing people is the best you're ever going to get.
One quote that it was funny because I opened my Facebook and it was from 2012 when I was just in college, and it came up with a post that I'd made by Brian Houston, and it said that people can and do change, but not as quickly as we want them to. I guess that's a typical Brian quote, right? But my question, I guess, is giving that over to Brian. People do change and can change,
Brian,
but he has.
Are you listening, Brian? Hello.
Are you listening, Brian?
No.
And I mean, the door is open for Bobby and Brian. The door has never been shut for Bobby and Brian to say, I'm sorry, we made a mess. But Bobby and Brian are constantly saying, you're the mess, you need to change.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So there's a huge problem here, because if they'll never do that, this church is going to keep hurting people. They can say 1,000 different things on their shows, on their podcasts, on their Instagram, on their Facebook, on whichever channel they want to, about not judging people and loving people and all of the stuff. But what is super important for them to do is to reach out to people that have been hurt by their church, to bring them together, to unite them, and then to look at themselves internally and to do an internal change. But they don't want to do that. They will just keep on saying it's not us, it's them. And that's the issue that is continuously allowing this toxic culture to go on. The only next step that we really have is to take this further into parliamentary inquiry into how they've treated college students, if they're mistreating the college students, if they're funneling money through the college, if they are doing all these things. Like,
from the word go, if as soon as you got a church, the sooner you got a college attached, the better, because there's your tax breaks. You can run everything through.
Yeah, there's a huge tax break. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
That's I can't even think of a way to say goodbye. Why don't we leave it there? And I've got a feeling you're going to come back and talk to us more about a lot more stuff. Hey.
Yeah, I would love to come back. And I really, to be honest with you, I think it would make a great TV show, People in Glass Houses.
I know,
because
right?
it's I think Netflix needs to contact.
Now we're talking. It's that centre they had at the time was literally, it kind of looks like Parliament House 15 years ago. This big glass house. Thank you so much. You're the best.
All right, have a good night.
So much more. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.